Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I had this piece of acrylic paper that I had taped down to my piece of plastic here and just was playing a little bit with some paints, just using this Catalyst wedge to kind of see what kind of marks I could make. I also have these silicone shapers. I was playing with some blues. There was like an underpainting that had some rusts and yellows in there, and I was just throwing some blue over it. Obviously, it's not finished. Obviously, I don't even like it. So I'm going to see if there's something I can do with this as an underpainting to get something more final that I like. So I'm going to give it a try. Okay, so I think I'm going to stick kind of with the blues. So I pulled some colors here. As you can see, they're very used. I have indigo. This is a cyan blue, and this is Naples yellow. Of course, we always have our white, and feels like this tube is almost empty, so I'll have to grab some other white. And I have this really, really bright kind of fern green color that I've been using on a few of my other landscape abstract paintings that I may throw in here if I find a good place for it. So the first thing I want to do, I think, is just cover up some of the background. Now I'm going to think about sort of big shapes and areas of color. And this is generally how I start my abstracts. It's kind of the same way I work with my collages, where I start with the largest piece as sort of a main anchoring piece. With abstract paintings, I kind of think about it the same way. I'm just kind of distribute some of this blue, maybe where I already have some blue, just to sort of get it started. Now with some of these colors, you have to know if they're opaque or transparent colors. Now this indigo, you'll see the little black square here, shows that it's opaque. So it should mostly cover up colors as long as I keep it thick enough. Naples yellow is semi-transparent, and the cyan is also opaque. It's kind of worn off, but the label is there. So if I wanted to do lots of layers where I see through, like I did here, you'll see that's very opaque. This is a color called steel blue. It's also a Lucas paint. And that is super, super opaque, as well as this. I think this was probably cyan mixed with white. And white is opaque. So anything you mix with white is going to make your colors more opaque. I'm just letting this dry just a little bit so that the colors don't smudge. Now I do like some of these areas. Like I like that you can see all the layers here. And I like this little area over here that's kind of a dry brush scratchy mark. They probably won't stay, but I do kind of like those effects. You know, I also have this sort of turquoise color. It goes really good with this blue. So I think what I'm going to do, now I'm doing these straight out of the tube. You know, most artists would cringe if you say you use color straight out of the tube. But since I'm already working on a piece of paper that's got lots of layers on it, and this is really just an exercise in seeing if I can do something with what's here, not really anticipating, you know, a final version of anything that's, you know, going to be a masterpiece. I'm not really worried so much about the colors. I just want colors that work well together. So I'm just thinking about sections of colors. I also like these marks here, so I may actually leave those, even though I didn't necessarily want to leave the blue-gray in that sort of creamy color. I don't like so much either with these colors, but we'll see. Maybe I can kind of reproduce that or change that to white. So basically what I'm doing is just covering up sections and making bigger shapes as opposed to all these tiny little shapes. Now this is a semi-transparent, so if I put this in this middle section, it may keep some of those marks underneath, or some of those colors. And I have to be a little careful because the turquoise and the dark blue is still really wet on here. You see how it's kind of mixing and making a green color. Not sure if I like that or not, but it's all right. I'll just go with it. Maybe we'll put some of that over here on that space. Now, I also don't like this really, really straight line across here, so I may need to, it's picking up some of the old paint and making little marks in there. Maybe the silicone. Yeah, it's already got so much texture because I've got a lot of layers of paint on here already. So again, this may just be an exercise in futility. But let's see what we can come up with. All right, I think I'm going to have to let this completely dry just so the colors don't get smudgy. Okay, so this is almost dry. There's a few little thicker areas. Now, once this dried and I had a chance to look at it again, I do like some of the marks here and here, sort of these pastel-y colors. So, you know, as well as this one. So I need to really focus kind of on the center and maybe leave some of those. And indigo's, because it's so dark, it really ends up almost being, when you mix it with white, it ends up being kind of a sky blue gray color. And I want to cover up some of this blue and some of the turquoise, I think. And I'm just kind of looking at where some of the breaks are in the stuff I have on there. I don't want a straight line, but I also don't want anything too, oops. I don't want anything too crazy. So there's a couple little spots that pop through there that are actually kind of nice. And I may cover up sort of this blue or gray color to bring in a little bit more of the blue. You know, just kind of work with what I have. But you certainly can mix this. So like this transition to this could be you know, you could throw a little more of the original indigo in there to transition some of that if you don't like hard edges. So maybe I'll make this edge a little more blended. I'll probably have to do something to tie this end in a little bit more. I'm going to cover up that. Just sort of kick it back a little bit. And if, you know, you overpaint it, this is just a baby wipe. I can come back in and, so as long as the paint's wet, you know, maybe I was like, nah, I liked it the way it was. I can pull some of that back off. Baby wipes are great that way. That's still a lot of blue. And I'm going to flip it around. Maybe I'll do some blending with the yellow and the turquoise. Let's see if I have any lemon yellow left. It's a much brighter yellow, and it should give me more green, like almost like a neon green. See how green that is? I can really add a pop of color in here. And I'm going to add some cadmium yellow because my lemon yellow is almost gone. And I don't think I have another lemon yellow, so I'm going to do cadmium, which is very close in color. They're pretty similar. The lemon yellow is just a little bit brighter. And I think I'm going to add some white to that as well because it's really kind of limey green. Kind of a nice color, actually. Let's put a little bit over that spot. So I'm just looking for where I already kind of have that yellow peachy color. And I'm trying to cover up a little bit of that. And again, we could transition where it jumps into the turquoise a bit. I know you've probably all heard a lot of painters talking about, you know, the messy middle, like the ugly stages of your painting. You know, this would definitely be it. And sometimes, you know, it just doesn't come out of ugly. And that's okay, because you're always going to learn something anyway. Just being able to paint. I think I'll just leave that couple little areas of interest. Maybe I can work with those a little bit. At least it's calmed down a bit. And now I just need to find some areas to put in some smaller marks. I think I also have some oil pastel crayons that I may make some marks on and see if that sort of leads to anything. I think this is almost becoming the focal point because it's so bright. So I think, you know, I'll just work with that and see if I can leave that area as the focal point. I do like these dark areas, but I think now I need to add just a little bit of that dark back in. The other thing I noticed is that this line kind of is about halfway through the painting, which probably isn't a good thing. I may need to change that sort of visual split somehow. But I'm going to come back in and add in some of this indigo. And I like the blue here, so I may leave some of that lighter blue mixture. But maybe what I'll do is kind of change the orientation of this darker blue so that it doesn't cut it in half. And you'll see there's a bunch of texture showing up here because there's paint, dried paint that's, you know, was thick on there from previous sort of paintings. So I've got just kind of some natural sort of texture in there. All right, I think I'm going to take this just a little bit further. Down into kind of the lines down here. It's hard when you get so many layers on here. The paint isn't really grabbed anymore, and it kind of sloshes around. That's one of the downsides to having a lot of layers of paint, especially on this canvas paper, because it only has so much tooth to it. And then it's really hard to kind of put stuff on without it really just sort of smearing in there. Okay, I'm going to flip this around again. And I think now I'm kind of pulling away from the center of the interest because I put this really light color on here. So I think what I'll do is I'll take my baby wipe and pull off some of the white. That I put down here. It's kind of nice when you let it dry in between layers, because then you can use the baby wipe if you have something you want to pull off. You can also add like a layer of matte medium to sort of seal the layer below. But that's like a whole nother step. And since this is really just me kind of messing with something that I didn't like to begin with, it really doesn't make sense to spend the extra time and matte medium to seal that. So let me go back to that. think I'll take this one off too. I think I'll leave that one there. And I'll leave that one there. I feel like I need to add some of the turquoise down there though. That's a lot. And I'm just gonna kind of let the texture that's happening there maybe happen. I've got so much paint on here at this point in time that there's like texture showing up. And maybe that's okay. Kind of getting the same thing here. So we'll just go with that. It also kind of eases the transition from color to color. Have a little bit of that sort of texture happening there. Now I want to come back and do that, I think, with the lighter, brighter color as well. Now, for composition, to balance things out, and I do this with my collages as well, I think about kind of colors and shapes and textures in like triangles, meaning that if I have kind of two versions of it down here, I kind of want to put one up here somewhere so that I have this sort of triangle of color so that it is sort of distributed throughout the painting or the collage. And if you watch any of my collage videos, you'll see I do have a tendency to do the same thing. If I use, you know, a blue piece here and a blue piece here, I'll try to have one somewhere so that it kind of forms a triangle like across the whole piece. I don't know if that's a normal composition thing or if it's just something I do, but I find that it actually works pretty good to kind of keep your eye moving around. Put a little bit more up there. And I think I want to pull this down kind of off the bottom here. All right, so I'm liking this a little more. I still have this sort of spot here that I'm not sure if I want to leave or not. I have some showing through here. Yeah, it might have been a different blue entirely. So I'm just gonna kind of brush in a little bit of that, just to kind of cover that up a little bit. Now I have this blue-gray that I just added, so I'm really gonna have to probably put it back in a few other places here. I have a little bit here already. See if I have some texture here. Just put a little bit here, just to kind of, again, sort of pull your eye from here to there with that color. And then I think I just need to darken that back up again. Now, that I'm not sure about either. I think I need to cover up those stripes a little bit, because then I've got stripes in that corner, stripes in that corner. And that just looks a little weird. So sort of transition. I may have to do something more with that once it dries. So this has had a lot of time to dry, and the colors have darkened up a little bit, which is typical of acrylic. I do like the texture that's added in here. This still, again, is not, you know, obviously my favorite painting, but I think it's definitely better than what I started with. So I think what I'm going to try to do is add a little bit of more highlight back in that area, and come back and just sort of skim over that texture a little bit in that spot here, just to draw the eye up here. There's quite a bit of sort of lighter color here already. I'm going to add just a little bit. And again, I'm thinking of a sort of a triangle. So here and here, then I probably want to just do a couple little dots, you know, maybe on the other side over there. And that just sort of keeps pulling your eye around the painting. I'm going to mix up even a brighter yellow and just hit a few of the spots over here. And just even go even like a little bit brighter yellow. I don't think I'm going to do much more with this, you know, spend any more time on this, but I thought it might be fun to show you that if you have a painting that isn't working, just to keep going and keep trying things. You know, as long as your paper and canvas can, you know, keep taking layers of paint, you know, and you're not painting super, super thick, you can keep going and just see what comes out. Now, I thought I might also put some oil pastel marks on there, and I have like all of these oil pastel colors. I could also maybe flick a little bit of white paint on there and give it a little bit of spatter. The bigger issue is really just finding a color that you like. It's taped on the edge here, so I'm not actually, that's a really, really bright green. Here's yellow. So like in this area, if I wanted to sort of increase that yellow, I just kind of, you know, roll the crayon over some of the area there just to add a few marks. And they're kind of random. I do like this blue. It's almost the color of this light blue, but it's just a little bit different. So again, you can do sort of big marks, you can do little marks, but just adding some of these mark textures can really bring it together a little bit more. Let me try this one. This one might be too green. This is more of a blue. I have a tendency to just kind of roll it in my fingers as I kind of move my arm to make sort of more random marks. But they just add, I think, add a little bit of interest. Again, this is my focal point, so I may come back and add in some more marks here in white. And here I've already got light color, so I can add some white here again to sort of distribute that color, but it's not going to be as contrasty since I'm already doing it on a light color. You know, and then maybe I just add a few little marks up here. Right, and it's oil, so I can also, you know, just kind of rub it in and rub it out a little bit. Or I can just, you know, consciously add some marks or dots, whatever I want to do. But I definitely think, you know, playing with old paintings or stuff that you don't like may potentially, you know, get you something new that you like that maybe you didn't think of or hadn't even anticipated. All right, so now that I've added my marks, I actually took off the tape so that I could better gauge the edges and the composition. I really, really like this so much better than what I started with. It still may not be frameable as it is, but one of the options that you can do, especially if you have something, this is 12 by 12 paper that I had taped off the edge, so it's not quite 12 by 12, but something that's a little bit larger. So what you can do is just, if you have some extra mats around that are smaller, I'm kind of in a square mode, so I've been doing a lot of square orientation paintings, but obviously you could do this any size you want. And you could also just crop some areas out that you really like. Like I really like this corner up here with these marks. So, and this sort of little hint of dark, sort of balancing it out down here. So there's a lot of options for maybe the whole thing isn't working. Like this area down here is, you know, there isn't much going on down here. So, you know, using this corner doesn't quite work, but you'll see if I kind of move it up a little bit so that I have this really strong sort of horizontal through here that's sort of broken up by this interesting shape. I still have this sort of quiet area down here, but then all this stuff going on up here. So that's kind of an interesting painting in and of itself. And I could just sort of keep moving this over to see if there's a composition I like better. This corner down here is also interesting. I like the blue on the edges to sort of frame it, although maybe I want to make that a little bit smaller. Or maybe I want to make the bottom a little bit smaller, make this area a little bit bigger. So I'm looking for a variety of color distribution as well as like sizes of those colors. So here's like a big blue area, and then down here there's some smaller areas, and they're a little bit different. And then I have kind of this really bright section in the middle. I do really like this one over here that we had sort of started with. I like this kind of this little dot that almost becomes a focal point. But then your eye sort of draws through and comes around. So I think that could make a nice composition. You could go the other way and go a little higher and pull in more of the blue and get rid of some more of the quiet area down here. I also think this is a really nice composition. And this almost looks, now it almost looks like a landscape to me with a tree or something here. I also have a 6 by 6 size. So, you know, if you don't find anything that large, sometimes going smaller. You know, I still like that corner there. Even that would look nice, although I liked the larger version better. Love this action coming in here with the dark blue. So that could be an interesting one by itself. This corner again may be better with the larger size. It's kind of fun sometimes to just get out these other sizes, especially when you have a little bit larger painting, and just see if you can find some other compositions. I've actually had paintings where I've found actually 2 or 3 different paintings from it, or sometimes even 4 if I'm working on like an 18 by 24. And then you end up with like this whole series of paintings that are consistent. Granted, they're a little bit smaller, but if they all work, why not? The other thing you could do is actually just try flipping it around. You know, sometimes we work on these things in one orientation for so long that we don't see it from a different perspective. I generally try to flip mine around as I'm working on it. It's a little bit harder when you're on video because things start to move a little bit. I think this orientation works as well. Again, I love this really sort of strong blue here that's sort of divided by these other colors, just to break that up visually. But I do think that, something like this orientation could work as well. It sort of brings your eye up in and sort of comes back down to this darker area down here. So don't forget to look at it in multiple perspectives as well. I enjoyed sharing this process with you of how I work over paintings that may not be working, or ones that I've started that just have some layers on, to really make something that's a little bit more dynamic and interesting. And adding layers where you get stuff that still comes through, and starting to build up the paint where you can then add texture on top, is one of the fun things I like about doing acrylic paintings, because the paint does have some thickness to it. So you can build up some texture, not only visually with layers, but actually physically with some of the texture of the paint. So I hope you have fun working on paintings that you may have wanted to throw away. Just hang on to them, paint over them, just keep going and see what you can come up with. Anyway, this was fun. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.